Hi, I'm Kyle Weckerly, Certified Professional Ghostwriter. I'm glad you're listening as I welcome industry experts to share stories. You'll hear of lessons learned the hard way, overcoming professional hurdles, turning experience into actionable knowledge, and how to connect with your target audience. This is the Career Challenges Podcast. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to the end of the year episode. This one will be a little bit different as I'm not welcoming a guest specifically. I will be going over all my guests from the previous year, kind of giving you a bird's eye view of who I talked to and what I learned from them, as well as answering a few questions and just giving you an update on what's happening with me and my business. So first off, I will point out, when I was batting around the idea of doing this episode, I put out on LinkedIn a request for questions. I'd asked, hey, is there any questions related to the Career Challenges Podcast and or ghostwriting that anybody wanted to answer? And only one person asked a question, so that was a little humbling. Hopefully next year more people will have questions. But anyway, Inga Bielinska, who's been a huge supporter of the podcast before it even launched, she was actually my 10th guest, one of my first 10 guests. She was the 10th one that I interviewed. Really great conversation. I'll touch on that later. But she did submit my one and only question for the podcast, and she asked how I go about finding guests for this podcast. Well, a lot of them are coming through referrals. I'm getting more referrals now than I did when I started, which is kind of what you want. The word's getting out there. I'm talking to people who are like, hey, I think somebody else would be a great person to be on this podcast. Nadia Noel Anglade, Ronan Leonard, Josh Steinley. They all have been referring guests to me, which has been great, and I've loved it. So guys, keep those referrals coming. I truly do appreciate it. But then also, I have approached people, especially in the beginning. I would approach people, those first 10 guests, I asked them directly, would you be okay with being on my podcast? And all of them said yes, and that was great. I do remember I asked about 20, 25 people, and these are the first 10 to get back to me. A couple of them, they showed interest but never gotten back to me, or they just didn't respond at all. So anyway, so when I first started, I was directly requesting people to be guests on the podcast, and then I'm getting referrals. I'm part of a couple guesting groups on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and that's how I'm also getting people onto my podcast. They just find me. One guest, actually, she had been doing a Google search and found my podcast and said, hey, what you're doing really lines up with what I do in my radio show out in Los Angeles, and that was Nancy Solari. And she sent me actually, she pitched me to be on the podcast, and so that was a huge thing for me. That was the first time somebody had gone to that lengths to be on my podcast, and that was great. I loved every minute of it. It really did, I'll admit this here, it really did help my ego a little bit when it came to running this podcast, and also let me know that I'm on the right path. When somebody is like, hey, what you're doing really matches up with what I'm doing, I think we could share that. Let's be on a or can I be on your podcast? I was like, yes, let's do that. So that's really how I'm finding my guests. And now I am kind of pivoting the show a little bit, and I'll touch on that later. But you'll be seeing slightly different, or you'll be hearing slightly different guests in the future. At first, it was really career coaches or people in that vein, but now I'm shifting a little more towards publishing. I'll explain more about that later. So let's talk about my guests. I've had, I think, 34 guests so far this year. I've already recorded about 5 or 6 for next year, and I've got a lineup of people I need to interview come January 1st, so January I think is going to be very busy for me. Anyway, these people, amazing guests, amazing stories. I love talking with all of them, and I learned at least one thing from everybody. And that's not to say I only learned one thing from each guest. I'm just saying sometimes there was stuff I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what I can do with that though. But usually every guest, I think I learned at least one thing from them. So let's go way back to the beginning with Marty Vids. And Marty Vids is a career coach and consultant all the way from Australia. So I felt very privileged to have him on my podcast. And great guy. Of course, he had that great Australian accent, which made it even more entertaining and fun. But we were talking really about being part of aha, that moment when something clicks for you. And as a career coach and a mentor, Marty Viz is a business mentor out there in Australia. He kind of walked me through that process. After telling me a story of how he came to be a business mentor and host of the Marty Viz show, he has his own podcast as well. He kind of walked me through that process and talked about how he asks those questions of the people who come to him for help. And he's asking these questions, and hopefully they're open-ended. It's not just right or wrong, true or false, so you have to know the answer every time. No. He's asking these questions to get people to think in a different way, or to see things they may not have been seeing before, until hopefully there's that click, that spark, that light bulb, an aha. And so hopefully through that, it leads to a mindset change. People begin to view themselves differently, view their circumstances differently, and things begin to change for them. And so that was a great conversation I had with Marty Vid. So you got to definitely look into that one. My next guest, episode 2, was Laura Hanson, and she's a consultant, speaker, mediator, and author. So I always love talking with authors. So I do want to plug her book very quickly here. A Little Unorthodox, a high school handbook for instructors. She wrote it. She comes from an education background. She was a former teacher. We got to swap some stories there about life in the trenches as a teacher, because it is not an easy job. I taught for a couple of years. I was a sub for a year or two. My wife is still teaching, and even though I'm not teaching, I feel it, and I see that all the stress and burden she has to carry as a teacher, and the wonderful work she's doing. I mean, she's really changing minds for tomorrow, and I really do pray that the students that are in her class go on to really do positive things for the world. And I will admit there are a few students that I know right now, oh, you're not going to do anything for anybody. Anyway, but that's the truth of it. But she also, her main thing was how to be serious and silly, and be able to transition between those. Not doing those simultaneously. That just never works. To be serious and silly at the same time never works. She talked about how to set up your conversations or set up your meeting space, either seriously or silly, and then being able to transition from one to the next. And she's hilarious already, so that points in her favor. So that works out for her. So great podcast there. Episode 3, I talked with Carolyn Thompson, and she is actually in Mobile, Alabama, and she talked about thriving where you are. She had been in LA for a while, and she had gotten things up and running there, but through some family circumstances and life events, she ended up back in Mobile, and then realized, what, just because I'm here doesn't mean I can't do what I want to do and be productive that way. So we talked about that, and real enlightening and insightful stuff. And so it got me thinking, hey, if she can really make this work in Mobile, Alabama, then I can definitely make this work in San Antonio, because we are a larger city. Just want to point that out. Episode 4, I talked with John Knotts, and he's a consultant, mentor, speaker, and author. And in fact, when we were talking, he says he's got like 16 books that he's wanting to write. He's already written about 3 or 4. One of them came out recently, or Overcoming Organizational Myopia, Breaking Through Siloed Organizations. How you don't necessarily have to tear down silos in an organization. You just need to be able to recognize that and come up with communication pathways, systems, strategies to embrace that. Because that's going to happen. People are going to silo themselves. They're automatically going to work or cling to the people they work with and create their own kind of little microcosms. Great conversation. He goes into it more in that episode, so definitely check out episode 4 on that. But also he talks about having a plan and how it took him a long time to come up with a plan for his life. I think he said he was in his late 20s when he finally came up with a plan, and having a 20-year plan, and how things have changed, but he's been able to adapt his plan to life circumstances. And that's important. That's always good to know. So don't be afraid to make a plan. I speak from experience. I'm worried that the moment I make a plan, that's when things are going to go horribly awry, and I have to pick up pieces and start again. But he was telling me, don't worry about that. Just have a plan and be able to adapt it to the changing circumstances of life. Episode 5, I welcome Derek Lewis, and we both went through the same ghostwriting certification course. So we have the same mindset when it comes to ghostwriting and approaching that, and we swapped a lot of stories. And I've known him the longest, I think, out of all the guests that I've had on the show. Anyway, he had talked about switching your mental narrative. And his journey, how he had started out thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to make it, to, you know what, heck, I am good. I know how to do this. And I got to, jump on that as well and espouse how, yeah, I believe that about myself. And there may be a little bit of arrogance there. I mean, let's be honest. When you believe that you are capable, more than capable at something, it does come across as arrogance. But at the same time, it is that self-confidence. If you don't have confidence in yourself to do something, you're never going to really be good at it. I mean, there's some things that you can be good at that don't involve a lot of brain space. I mean, flipping burgers, I understand that may be underneath certain people's dignity, but it is something that you can be good at without a lot of thought. But then there's things like ghostwriting where you do have to have that self-confidence because you are taking somebody's story and it's your responsibility to do a good job with it. So there, you do have to have confidence in yourself. And so Derek and I got to talk about that and some other stuff about ghostwriting, which we had a lot of fun with and going through. So it was great to have him on the show. Brian Benavides, he was my first repeat guest, and I'll get to his second episode here in a minute. But he talked about assessing behavioral strengths, how your business can benefit from having these personality tests. Now, I go into it in the episode, so you'll have to go and listen to it to get the full details. But I did say that, I don't really believe in those, but he kind of swayed me that, these personality tests, they can help. And even though you may not believe them to really work for you, there is some value there, some benefit, even if you yourself don't believe that. If your higher-ups can utilize that information to put you in a place to where you're more effective or more beneficial, or you can really grow and tap into your potential, then that's what a good thing is, and you need to do that and be open to that. So, great stuff there. Episode 7. Mark Adams, Finding the Right Talent. He's a talent recruiter, and so I learned a lot about the talent recruitment industry from him. And then Daniel Gomez, episode 8. Daniel Gomez is a motivational speaker right here in San Antonio. And he started out in the auto industry, and he's still doing a lot of that, but just in the 6 months since we recorded our episode, I've seen things really explode for him. And he is traveling a lot. He got to meet Les Brown, Grant Cardone. I think he's got a speaking engagement with Grant Cardone. He's put together a couple conferences here in San Antonio, and things are just really picking up for him. So it's kind of mind-boggling, like he was on my podcast. Anyway, it was a great conversation that we had, and he's also an author. He wrote the book You Were Born to Fly, so you definitely need to go and read that. But the main thing we talked about, of course, was mindset, and that does seem to be a common theme here. But he also has some actionable steps. But he had talked about how you can either have that employee mindset or an entrepreneur mindset. Basically, either I need to depend on somebody else for my security, or I can depend on myself for that financial security and that job security. And it was a great conversation. And he also had a perk for those listening to that specific episode for one of his mindset training courses and career development courses. So go and listen to that. You'll at least get a perk for that. It'll be worth your time. Jay Richardson, episode 9, Building Legendary Service. And Jay Richardson goes from business to business, kind of helping them find inconsistencies in their book. Now, he's not a hatchet man or anything. He doesn't go and fire people for companies. No, he helps them run more efficiently. And, we do talk about that a little bit, that maybe sometimes it does involve letting somebody go. But more often than not, he is working with them to find ways to help their companies run more efficiently and increase their level of customer service to where it's basically legendary customer service. People love working with those companies because of what Jay has helped them do. So that was a great one, too. And he was in Midland when we recorded this. He's originally from the Virginia, I think Arlington, Virginia area, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he was in Midland, He's like, hey, why don't you just drive over to Midland? I'm like, I think we'll just do a phone call. Episode 10, Inga Bielinska, the importance of listening. Now, I mentioned her earlier already. This one, I think, had the biggest impact of me out of the first 10. I would really have to think who's had the biggest impact on me out of all the episodes, but I'm not done with the podcast, so I can't say that. But the first 10, Inga's interview, I think, had the most impact on me because she works with international clients. She's a business coach and mentor, and she has clients, I think, on all the major continents except for Antarctica, of course. But she's dealing with people from different backgrounds. And I asked her, well, how do you handle that? And she said, well, I usually start asking them, what is your mindset? I'm curious what your mindset is. And by asking that question, she said it really takes that, I guess, those background differences out of the equation, and we focus really on the heart of the matter. And so I've taken that to heart, and I do ask a lot of my guests that I'm curious what your mindset is, because I'm talking with people who are not from my background. I don't know what it's like to have walked in their shoes. I mean, I do learn a little bit, but it's important to realize that we're from different backgrounds, and even though this is a professional setting, I don't want to offend somebody or make them think that I'm looking down on them in any way. I just want to learn from them. And so when I ask them, I'm curious about your mindset, I think that lets them know on a subconscious level that I really just want to know. I'm here to learn. I'm open. Talk to me, and I'll sort it out on the other end. And then also in another way, that it's asking them to be the expert in that situation, which is great, which is why I'm here. I'm providing this platform for experts to talk about what they love to talk about. Hope Zavara, how to inspire with your story. Now, Hope Zavara explained me something really cool that I was like, oh, they actually do this? And they're called speak-offs, where you show up, I think, like at a Toastmasters or Toastmasters-like event, and they give you a topic, and you speak on it. And that's how you compete. I thought, well, that's really cool. Kind of like a riff-off, in a way. But I thought that was awesome. And I was like, oh, how does that work? Anyway, she had talked about how she went from owning a yoga studio to going into speaking full-time, and she's putting together training courses. And she's coming out with one called Mother Trucker Yoga, which was really cool. You got to look into that. And I hope that's coming out. I need to touch base with her and see how that's going. But anyway, it was a really great story, and she's very open about the struggles that she's gone through, eating disorder, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And it's, just in that hour that I had to talk with her, I'm like, this is really good stuff. And that's what I hoped would happen with this podcast, and I'm still surprised when it does happen, that these people are opening up and sharing their stories. I'm getting to learn from them. I'm like, wow, this is great. Contessa Louise Cooper, episode 12, Redefine Failure. Now, she puts together virtual summits for companies, and she also does a lot of them on her own because she's, putting together these summits and stuff, and for specific types of businesses or specific business situations, I guess is what you would want to call them. But she's not had an easy life. After we connected for the podcast, I friended her on Facebook and LinkedIn, and some of the stuff she was sharing there, I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that at all. So it put it into a new light of where she's at, and then knowing where she's come from. It was humbling just to say that I had her on my podcast. So Contessa, if you're listening to this, just know you had a profound effect on somebody way far away. I know she's in New Jersey and I'm in Texas, so it was, that's a good distance. So, points there. Anyway, she had talked about virtual summits and how they will help businesses and people who want to get into speaking, because generally they're free. People who are doing speaking, they will sell from the stage, but it's really to help them talk more about it, get their feet wet into the speaking world, but also, up their marketing in a way. All right, a lot of people don't want to go into speaking. I understand it is very trying and scary, but these virtual summits are kind of a way to sidestep that, which is great. And so when she's working with people to put on virtual summits themselves, she's kind of doing what I do, except with virtual summits. Whereas I ghostwrite a book, she ghostwrites virtual summits, which is really cool. So I did get to nerd out about that. So episode 13, Stephanie Latore, It Is Easier Than You Think. Stephanie Latore, she called all the way from Italy, so another international guest. Even though she's from New Jersey, she's living in Italy. So I count her as another international guest, so that was great. Talking about how it's easy to get your business started now. She said for as little as $10 you can get things up and running. Some people would argue it's a lot harder than that, but she was kind of boiling it down to you don't have to have all of this, funding and planning and everything to get things up and going. You can really start small and build from there. For some people that works a lot better. And she mentors a lot of female entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurs. So for her, it's very, very close to her heart to be like, okay, this isn't about how good at business you are, quote unquote, or how important it is for you to have all this funding behind you. It's more about your desire to make something happen. And so that was a great thing to learn from her. And episode 14, Never Be Afraid to Reinvent Yourself. My guest for that episode was Kevin Kelton. He's a screenwriter. I don't know if he's still doing a lot of screenwriting. He says he's kind of moved away from that. But he's also the host of the More Perfect Union podcast, which is a political podcast. I've listened to some episodes. It's very enlightening. But they're trying to be more centered in their discussion, which I really do appreciate, especially in this political climate. Whether you're conservative, right, liberal, left, somewhere in the middle, I just feel things have gotten very, very vicious and mean. And that's not to say there aren't people doing bad things out there in our political offices. I'm just saying they're much more vicious and cold when it comes to reporting it. And so to be honest, I'm tired of it. I just don't like politics to begin with. But he was smart. He stayed away from that because I'm like, I don't want to talk about politics. Anyway, we did talk a lot about TV and writing stuff, and I got to nerd out with him on that. And then also I came back around later outside of the podcast, and I got to ask him some stuff about screenwriting. He was very helpful with it, and it's enlightened me when assessing screenwriting projects, whether I want to take those on or not. Episode 15, Donna Gunter, Make Them Choose You. Now, this one I've really enjoyed because Donna Gunter writes books for other companies. She's the business fame maker of BizSmart Media. She writes books for people, and that really helps them create a platform and market them and their businesses. Now, she does really short books. I'm more of like these novel lengths or even, Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers kind of stuff. That's more my speed. She does it kind of shorter, but still, what was great about Donna and her business is that with a book, she was saying, and these are her words, that with the book, you can really turn your target audience onto what you and your business are doing, and that they will make them choose you, which is great. And being the ghostwriter that I am, I love that aspect of it, and the book and how it can help people with their growing their audience and everything. Helping 1,000 Families, Lorena Tomasini. This was a great conversation. We talked about, the business parts, or business aspects and life insurance, and, really connecting with people and talking with them one-on-one when you can help them, but they may not always be receptive to that. And so that was an interesting conversation. Jeff Munn, Promoting Self-Awareness. This one, I will admit, I did get kind of, what's the word for it? Introspective, I should say. There was a point where I felt, wow, I'm really turning this into my own counseling session or my own consulting session. And so I try to get away from that and keep it more about talking about him and his business. But Jeff's big thing is to incorporate meditation into his consulting business so that people are aware of themselves and what they're thinking and their mindsets and their motivations and how it's affecting not only their business but their lives. Because if you're not healthy emotionally as well as physically, your life is going to suffer and your career will suffer. And so that was episode 18, Brian Benavides. This was his second episode, How to Simplify Business. And we kind of carried on our conversation earlier from the behavioral strengths and how we can sometimes make businesses more complicated than what they need to be. Now, the the personality test and all that, that may seem like a lot of work, but when you're born, or when you're really looking at it from a bird's eye view or from up above, you're trying to find ways to get your company to run more efficiently or cleanly. And so you're simplifying business that way. And we also talked about other avenues to simplify business. But that's what really struck me, is that it may sound complicated, but sometimes you have to do a lot of kind of labor-intensive stuff, or stuff that may not be directly related to what you want to do with your business. But it is essential so that when you do get to that point of running your business, in my case would be ghostwriting. But once you finally get to it and it's more efficient and more streamlined, that's really better. And instead of waiting until you find that problem, and he's trying to kind of head off those problems. David Summerfleck, small business success. David Summerfleck, he's semi-retired. He said he was semi-retired because he was just so bored in Florida that he's like, well, I'm going to pick up some work while I'm here, but I'm not going to go all the way, which is great. He's also the host of the Blue Monday podcast, which I guested on his podcast as well, and there's a link on the website if you want to hear my interview with him, or his interview of me, and then my interview of him. We talked about small business success, and he's very frank about, I'm helping people, I'm trying to get them to a successful phase in their business, or to a place in their business where things are really working for them. But most of the time, the people I'm helping don't want to follow my advice or follow the plans that I'm helping them set out, and things don't work out for them. And I'm sorry that happens, but because they're not listening. And so in his interview with me, or his interview of me, he gave me a lot of really great pointers, and I'm working on implementing them now. And David, I have to apologize. I'm not working as fast as I promised I would, but I am getting it done. Just trust me, it'll work out soon. I mentioned her before, but Nancy Saleri, How to Be Resourceful. She was a great guest. She approached me directly and said, I would like to be on your podcast, and here's why, X, Y, and Z. I was like, oh, wow, this is great. She's done that homework and really positioned herself as a great guest for my podcast, and I was really humbled by that. I thought, this is great. I would love to have her on my podcast. But she's the host of the Living Full Out radio program, and she helps people find ways to be resourceful in their careers and in their own lives. And sometimes it's easy, and I speak from personal experience. I'm dealing with this right now. Well, not literally right now, but my current phase in life, I'm trying to figure out what is available to me that I can utilize and take advantage of to get to where I want to go. And she's doing that with people on a daily basis. So it's a really great conversation I had with her. And she's also legally blind. She was diagnosed, I can't remember the condition name, but her mother had it, so she knew, or they tested her and they knew she had it and she would eventually lose her sight. So she was able to get going early on her path and what she wanted to do. And in a way, I think that was pretty cool that she was able to crystallize quickly what she wanted to do with her life. It took me, I think, until I was almost 30 to realize what I wanted to do with mine. And I feel I wasted a lot of valuable time. Anyway, but it was a great conversation with Nancy, and hearing her story and how she's using that to help other people change their lives. Super Joe Pardo, coaching skills. I thought it was really cool. He introduced himself as Super Joe Pardo. And this isn't an arrogance thing. It's really kind of the persona or his shtick when it comes to coaching. Because he talked about how he's been coaching, from teenage years and helping people. I thought that was really cool. And so we talked about that and how he's expanding his coaching skills, his coaching business, but also he is got a TV show that's up and running. I think he's looking for people in the New England area to help them grow their business. But he's also the host of the business podcast with Joe Pardo, of course. That's the name of his podcast. And so it was great. We swapped some podcast stories, but learning more about how he's helping people, specifically in the New England area, because he's running that. And then he also runs a podcasting convention, and that was cool to learn about. And then hopefully I'll be able to go to either that one or something similar here in Texas. Tom Sylvester, Picking Your Path. Now, Tom wrote a book with his wife, Adriana, and it's called Lifestyle Builders, and it's great. I'm like, oh, book. I love this book. I actually went out and bought it right after I got off the podcast with him, because I thought this is going to be really cool, and I need to read that. It's on my reading list. But he's talking about how he's able to help people build the kind of lifestyles they want, and not necessarily business, but a specific lifestyle, because he also shared some stories about people he helps become successful in their business, but then things kind of fell apart for them at home afterwards. And so now he's trying to really expand beyond just one thing and helping people with more than just one thing. So that was great. And then he also touched on a point that I think is really key as a ghostwriter, helping people write business books. And I put this into the cold open of that episode, so it's the very first thing you hear when you start that episode. But he was talking about how the book helps him connect with his ideal client. So he's seeing more of his ideal clients come to him directly, whereas before it was kind of, can I help this person? I might be able to help them, but not as to the fullest extent that I feel that I can. And so I thought that was really great. His book is really helping him and his business to touch on the people who really would benefit most from his services. So it was good. So Tom and Ariana Sylvester, Lifestyle Builders, go find the book. Crystal Jones Taylor, What is Hurting Your Business? Crystal Jones Taylor, she's a management consultant who specializes in organizational development, and she had just gotten her degree in this. She's branching out into that. She's helping people do that, and we got to talk about how organizational development, it may sound like a cute buzzword, but when you think about it, you're making your organization run more efficiently. Whereas Brian Benavides was talking more about personality tests from that angle, Crystal Jones Taylor is really more about implementing systems for your company and your business, which I thought was really cool. We got to talk about that more. And she was a great guest, too. She admitted later on that she was very nervous, but I'm like, you came across really great. Because when that episode went live, it got a higher reaction or a higher response than some of my other episodes did. So, Crystal, if you're listening to this, you actually had a bigger impact than most of my other guests. So, just saying. Nadia Noel Anglade. First off, I want to apologize. I think I butchered her name during the episode, and I feel bad about that. But she talks about the power of networking, and she's running the Networking Embassy. And again, just between the time that we recorded the podcast and now, things have really exploded for her, and things are taking off. When we had recorded the episode, she had told me, okay, I'm going to be the Master of Ceremonies for Daniel Gomez's conference that he's putting together. I was like, really? You already got that going? And then last time we talked, she had said she's running the HR or running some training programs for an international company. And that was just in, I think we recorded this in August or September, and now it's December, and she's already getting those things up and going, and they weren't even on the board for her when we talked the first time for the podcast. So I'm blown away by that. And Nadia's really expanding things, and she's been referring guests to me, which is great. And they've all been great guests. Like I just said, Crystal Jones Taylor, she was one of those guests that referred to me. So that was amazing. And then John Knotts referred Nadia to me. So I mean, that's circle of guest referrals. And then I'm always happy to refer these guests to other podcasters as well. Pat Whitty transitions in life. Now, Pat Whitty, he was 77 when he recorded this episode. I don't know how old he is now. But we had a great time talking about just how age is viewed in our society today. And he's very passionate that, just because you're quote-unquote old or in your quote-unquote old age does not mean you're done, does not mean you have nothing to contribute to business or to those around you. How basically those, again, quote-unquote old people are a walking library. And, I admitted to him that, my grandparents, I love talking to them. I'm trying to get more information out of them, but they're just not as open. I mean, they'll talk. They'll share their stories. I mean, my grandpa can talk like nobody's business. He was a former salesman, so he loves to talk, but it's not always about deep stuff. And so we were able to get into that, me and Pat. And he was talking about how he's helping people, even at 77, become more healthy, and how he feels he's the healthiest he's ever been in his life, and that it really helps him to keep up with his grandchildren, for one. And, I have kids, and I have trouble keeping up with them, and I'm, quote unquote, young. So I thought that was interesting. But it's really great. So don't think that because you're old, in quotes, that you have nothing to contribute. That's not, or that you're done with life. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Another international guest this time, Paul Padmore, Failure and Success. He called all the way from Basingstoke, UK. And that was a lot of fun. Of course, he's got that awesome British accent, which I think really helps him. Whereas I kind of a pseudo California / Texas accent. I don't really think that's helping me. Anyway, Paul and I talked about how failure and success are really linked together. You cannot get to success without incurring failure. And if you have no failure, you will have no success. The key is turning that failure into a stepping stone towards success. And Contessa Louise Cooper and I talked about that as well. That was one of the central pillars of our conversation, and was the same here with Paul. And then Paul asked me a lot about ghostwriting as well, which I always love talking about ghostwriting. Anyway, he's also a podcaster running the My Perfect Failure podcast, so go check that out. That's a lot of fun. But it was great. We also talked about sports. I learned about Southampton FC, Basingstoke as well, and then talked about the San Antonio Spurs and how they get no respect. All right, I get to go on that ad nauseum during the episode, so check into that. It is worth a listen to. Trust me. You will learn a lot. But Paul, it was a great conversation we had. And I really enjoyed kind of exploring that mindset of turning your failures into something more, which I think is great and that everyone needs to hear. Marquez Mosier, he's running the Think More, Care More, Live More group on Facebook, and he's doing, not necessarily speaking, he's doing more small group things, one-on-one stuff. And his mindset and what we had talked about is kind of changing your focus to getting more out of life, to being present, to being more focused on what it is that is bringing you meaning and happiness in life. And that was a really in-depth conversation. If I start talking about it now, I'm not going to stop. So sorry, Marquez, it's not because I didn't like it, it's just because I will go forever on it. Coaching Criteria, Charlotte Barrett. This one was also great. She's from London, UK as well, so she also has a really great British accent. You can tell I'm really drawn to people who have awesome accents from other continents, so I thought that was good. Inga Bilinska, her accent was really cool too. I thought that really, it works in her favor. Anyway, we talked about finding coaches for your careers and your companies. And she's a startup coaching consultant, so she's helping companies, specifically female entrepreneurs and women-led companies and small organizations, get up and running. So that was really cool and something I guess I'm learning more about. I'm like, wow, there's really not a lot. And I was so ignorant about that, and I apologize that right now to anybody who may have said something ignorant too. But Charlotte was great. We talked about all that stuff and how she's helping people get up and running, and her own story and how that came back around. And we also got to joke about being organized as parents, and how I need to be more organized. And even though I probably do have more organization in my life right now with my children, I'm just not necessarily better at it. So, yeah, think about that. Roland Benson, Building Entrepreneurs. Roland Benson runs Benson Designs right here in San Antonio. And he's now getting into speaking, and he's launching Entrepreneur Builders. And he's going to help 100,000 entrepreneurs make at least $1 million with their business. That's his goal. And we got to talk about that and really go into the mindsets and talk about Seth Godin's Purple Cow, which worked into that conversation really well. and how he overcame dyslexia and anxiety to build the successful company that he has. And so he wants to give back to those who are, struggling like he was, maybe not exactly like he was, but are trying to get things up and running. And so it's really near and dear to his heart. And you can really hear the passion in his voice. And then we also got to talk about how we embarrass our wives, which I do that on a regular basis. Not going to lie. Desiring to help others. Cassandra Robinson was my guest for this one, and she's a faith-based career coach. And so we talked about, of course, career coaching as well. It's always been a big topic on this podcast from day one. But how she integrates her faith in Jesus and in God to help people. And, I come from a Christian background. We can spend forever trying to define that. But for me, it was important to really talk about how she's helping people with that approach. And we talked about Bible verses, which I admit I'm not good at remembering them. And somebody pointed that out on LinkedIn, and I had to laugh because I'm like, yeah, I'm terrible at it. What was his name? Anyway, if you're listening, the guy who made that comment, it was great. I loved it. Keep making comments like that. It was funny. Anyway, it was a great conversation. She's also from California as well. I grew up there. She's from Southern California. I'm from Northern California, so we got to talk about that. But it was great to talk more about how that approach and being a Christian and her desire to help people fulfill their lives is really kind of part of the whole aim, I feel, of Christianity. I thought that was great. Another Australian, Ronan Leonard, learning from masterminds. Ronan helps people put together masterminds. He's the mastermind guy. And he also has a great course that there's a link in the show notes for that episode, so you can go check that out if you want to learn more about it. But he talks about how a mastermind, you can do courses and all that. You can read books. But there's still going to be that learning curve. With a mastermind, you can cut down that learning curve because you're talking directly to people who have been there before you and will hopefully take months and years off of that learning curve so you get there faster. Now, of course, you do need to pay to be part of the groups, and that's part of the benefit of running your own mastermind is you're helping people directly, but you're not doing it for free. And some people, they hate that. And I know there's a discussion there on, well, you should give back for free, but at the same time, it's my time that I'm giving up here. I need to get some sort of compensation for that. So, there's that discussion there. But, Ronan and I really talked about infinite mindset and being better. And I chased a lot of rabbits during our conversation, but the discussion on masterminds I thought was really great and, really, really enlightening. So, if you want to learn more about masterminds, go check out Ronan Leonard, the mastermind guy from Australia. All right, my last guest for the year was Josh Steinley, and he's writing the book, The 7 Systems of Influence. And if you go to Josh Steinley's website, influence.com, I think, or just the 7 Systems of Influence, there's a link in my show notes, so go check that out. Also check him out on LinkedIn. He puts out a lot of great content there, a lot of great discussions, which I think are fun, at least to read the comments, even if you don't partake in them. But just check it out. He's also a published author. He wrote CMOs at Work, which did a lot, and he's also got another book coming out, LinkedIn Mastery. That's going to be coming out in May, I think, of 2020. We do get to talk about how influence is important, not just working with people in your business or maybe even in your family, but with yourself. You're trying to get things to work for you, and you do need to influence people. Now, it's not just influence. Just having influence is not going to make things work for you. It is part of that process, and he goes through those 7 systems, how you need to have content and vision and genius zone and collaboration, but most of all, love. The 7th system is love. And he touched on kind of the key for me as a ghostwriter, and he put it into words so eloquently, but he said we're connecting our brains together and we're understanding each other more. To understand each other perfectly perhaps is a hopeless thing that we're never going to accomplish in this life, but the more we understand each other, the more we get along. And I'm going to touch on this more later, but he so perfectly summed that up. And I was like, that's great. And that's the cold open to that episode, so that's the first thing you hear when you start that episode. So please go listen to that. And then listen to the whole episode as well, because we were talking about books during that whole thing and writing. and how writing is really, it's more than just putting words on paper or telling a great story, which are important things. Telling a great story is just vital because we all are geared to absorb stories. Some people more than others, but just that thought of, when you hear a story, and especially a nonfiction story of somebody else and their struggles, you get to learn more about them. So I thought that was great, and it was great that he said that in that episode as we come to the close of the year, and how I'm going to be pivoting my show a little bit to kind of incorporate more publishing and story and bringing all that together. Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Go to careerchallengespodcast.com to find out how. While you're there, check out other episodes and download them through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. The Career Challenges podcast is hosted by me, Kyle Weckerly. I'm a certified professional ghostwriter who works with business thought leaders and industry experts to write polished manuscripts, assess their publishing options, and create book marketing plans. I've worked with consultants, high-ticket salespeople, coaches, speakers, C-level executives, and business owners. My authors have worked for USAA, Vistage, Booz Allen Hamilton, Austin Technology Council, and the John Maxwell team. My authors want to write a book to serve as a platform for their marketing endeavors. They know that becoming an author will help them secure speaking gigs, market their expertise, promote a product or service, and more. Are you ready to turn your experience, knowledge, and stories into actionable advice and connect with your ideal client? Then visit weckerlywriter.com to schedule a consultation today and begin your publishing journey. That's weckerlywriter.com. WECKERLYWRITER.com. And now, back to the Career Challenges podcast. So I hope you enjoyed that rehash of all my guests for this last year. But I do want to talk more this last little bit of what's next for me. I always ask my guests what's next for them. What's on the horizon, what are they excited about? So then for myself, because I'm always looking towards the future as well, what is next for me? And so I'm pivoting the Career Challenges podcast to focus more on the publishing industry and telling stories. Now that doesn't mean if you don't have any background there that you can't be on the show. That's not what I'm saying at all. If you're an industry expert and you want to share your story and, of course, what's happening next with your business and how you're helping people, maybe not specifically as a career coach or as a consultant or someone who works directly with people to help build their skills, but if you want to at least share your story and help other people with your story in some way, then please do reach out to me. Please do reach out to me. But I just want to kind of state what I'm doing now. I've been working with John Knotts as well. He's consulting me as I grow my business. But we were talking about mission and vision statements. And even though I haven't quite put the last touches on my vision and mission statements, what it has made me do is think more about what I want to do as a ghostwriter. When I first got into ghostwriting, of course, I wanted to do something that I was good at and had a passion for and knew I could make a living out of. But also, I would be helping people. Helping people has been near and dear to me for a long time. I love helping people. I get a buzz out of it. I'm not going to lie. But also knowing that people are better off because of something that I've done, and that's key there. But also because I'm going to help them share their stories. And there's been research into this. When you share a story with someone, or when they read it, or even hear it on a podcast or in an audio form, it triggers mirror neurons in the brain. So even if you're not physically doing the things in the story, it's the second best thing that you can get to actual experience. For example, I used to work in pest control. It was an exciting job, got to tell you. Got bugs all over me every day. But one of the guys who was doing some training, I went to a class and he did some training, he said, don't just start spraying the house willy-nilly and walking around, just constantly spraying. Watch what you do first and make sure you know where you're spraying before you actually start to spray. Never just go into a new house and, oh, look, we'll spray this, this, and this, because he had told a story about how he was walking along a baseboard and spraying that baseboard and wasn't paying attention, turned a corner and sprayed this expensive exotic bird and killed the bird. So because of that story, I kind of had that experience now of, oh, I know what can happen if I do that. If I just walk into a house and start spraying willy-nilly, I could kill somebody's expensive exotic bird, because then you got to pay for that. Don't want to do that. So that was, that experience. And so what I want to do as a ghostwriter, or what's more crystallized in my mind now as a ghostwriter, is helping people to share their stories so that more and more people can learn from that experience. And that specifically pest control stories. I have just an example. But even business stories, even if you're talking about, well, how you can increase the productivity of your workforce through these, 8 new steps that I've come up with, if you're using a story to get that point across, that's the experience that they're going to be able to absorb and implement into their own business environment. And I think that's really key there. But also what's happening is when you're sharing those stories, you're promoting empathy. When you feel for somebody else, when you understand, okay, I may not have lived through what they've been through, but I at least know that, how they act or how they think, or their mindset, their approach to something like this, it's going to be different from mine. And if I approach it this way, it's probably not going to work out. I need to approach it a different way. And that's what I want to do, because stories have that power, and they've had that power on me. Just real quickly, I don't want to really go into this too deeply, but one of the reasons, or the main reason, that I looked into writing seriously to make a go of it, to make a career out of it, was I'd lost a child when I was 28. My wife and I lost a child, and it really made me stop and examine what I wanted to do with my life. And I thought, you know what, I really enjoy writing. And it was those stories that got me through that rough time, and support from family as well, and my faith in God helped me get through it as well. But it was stories that really, really helped me. And so I want to do that for other people, because there's also that meme going around Facebook and LinkedIn that, your story could be part of somebody else's survival manual. So I want to do that for others. And as a ghostwriter, that is what I want to do here, helping people put together their books. And I'm getting to do some of it now, but not a lot. So that said, I want people to share more stories. All right, so come on to the podcast and share your story. And if you want to write a book with me, great, let's do that too. We can talk about that as well after the podcast too. Or if you know somebody who needs to write their story and share it with people, then please have them contact me, and I would love to talk about that more. So yes, if you're wanting to be a guest on the podcast, please do reach out to me. Right now, I will admit, my ghostwriting is not a full-time endeavor right now. I am doing it on the side still. So I do have a day job that I'm holding down. So please don't let that deter you. It does limit my hours, but I do want to work with you to get you on the show. If you have a great story and are willing to share that with more people and expand your audience and your platform to help your business, then please do reach out to me. But here's to a great year, 2019, and here's to an even better year, 2020, with more stories shared, helping more people with their stories, and promoting empathy so that the world is a more compassionate place. Thank you, and Happy New Year. Thank you for listening to the Career Challenges Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Career Challenges Podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Visit careerchallengespodcast.com for more information. Schedule your free consultation with Kyle Weckerly by visiting weckerlywriter.com today. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com. Thank you.